More than 20 years ago, I began a journey, my quest for the truth. My name is John Greenewald, and I have hammered the United States government with Freedom of Information Act requests trying to get answers. I have more than 2 million pages of declassified documents for you to download at theblackvault.com. Now, I attempt to dive even deeper and talk to some of the most brilliant minds on this planet. No government secret is off limits, and no question is off the table. All I aim for is the truth. This is the Black Vault Radio. That's right, everybody. This is the Black Vault Radio. I'm your host, John Greenewald Jr., and you know the drill. Thank you so much for tuning in and making this your podcast and radio show of choice. I know that there are tons of options out there. If you have not already, definitely subscribe to this show. There's 12 million ways to do it. So feel free to find your favorite podcast aggregator or iTunes or Google Play Store or however you listen to your radio shows. I'm probably on there. If not, let me know and I'll make sure that I do get on there. And a new addition in the last month or two, at least there's a lot of new content coming online, is the Black Vault YouTube channels. Now, that's right, there are channels. That's plural. There's 2 of them. So make sure that you subscribe to that because there is really some fun stuff coming. For the most part, the interviews on the Black Vault Radio are now streamed live. So you can tune in and see what happens during the actual interview. Then they turn into the podcast within a few days. You know, it depends on scheduling. But within a few days, they're dumped to a larger radio format, and then it dumps out to those various podcast feeds. So make sure that you subscribe to all of that, because if you want to take part, I now take questions from the chat room and also have a toll-free line that's set up that I will be able to, depending upon the show and the timing, take toll-free line calls where you can call in, participate, just like a live call-in show. No set time. It's completely random. So it's not like a Tuesday night at 8 kind of thing. It really adheres to my guest's schedule, and then I just kind of I go accordingly. And for those of you who want to listen in, you can. And for those of you who can't, don't worry. You can still catch the replay. But then on top of that, you'll catch the podcast as well. So it's a huge help for me if you go ahead and subscribe to all of that. And, well, if you're at it, here's a shameless request. If you can add a review for the show, that would be awesome. If you're listening on YouTube or watching on YouTube, give a thumbs up, subscribe to that channel. It is very much appreciated. Now, coming up on this particular episode, I'm going to be honest with you, I was on the fence on doing it. And now let me just preface this by saying this is an example of what is being streamed on the YouTube channel. However, through quite a few requests to make an audio version of my presentation, even though I'm a little apprehensive of doing it, I'm doing it because it sounds like a lot of you don't have the time to sit down and watch this on YouTube. Here is my personal recommendation. If you can, if it doesn't make any difference to you and you rather see rather than listen, definitely do it on YouTube. Go to www.theblackvault.com/live. That will forward you to the YouTube channel that streams the live videos, that is. And it will allow you to watch a full presentation with visuals, a PowerPoint presentation, photographs, graphics, so on and so forth. Again, this is the audio version of that presentation. So if you can't watch it, don't worry. Here it comes. One friendly caveat. Obviously, this was a live presentation with visuals, so you might hear me say, and look here and look there. But planning on doing this, or at least the potential of it, I went ahead and read most of what I was showing you or explained it. So for those who were watching, you probably thought, man, this guy's just going overboard. Well, the plan was, if there were enough requests that came in, I at least had a somewhat viable audio version of this presentation. Now, what is the presentation? Well, Very recently, I received documents through the Freedom of Information Act from the Office of the Secretary of Defense, or OSD. This is the office that was rumored to be the employment of Mr. Luis Elizondo. I say rumored because, well, it was rumored for a little while, and then it was obviously confirmed a long time ago. However, what was not confirmed was essentially how he got the 3 videos that we now associate with UAPs or UFOs and connect them to the AATIP program. Now, that part still hasn't been proven, and I'm sure they are connected to AATIP somehow, but there's really kind of no evidence for it. I know people think I get into the nitty-gritty details, but sadly, you just got to do it. If there's no evidence to support they're part of AATIP other than Mr. Luis Elizondo's words, well, I've got to point it out. When evidence presents itself, fantastic. What we do know, however, from these documents that were released was that these were the communications, the emails between Mr. Luis Elizondo, who we now know is the former, he claims to be the former head of this AATIP program, or AKA top secret Pentagon UFO study. That is obviously in dispute. The official word is he had no responsibilities on the program. So it's a very controversial topic right now. And so what I did was I went after the communications between Mr. Elizondo and Dobbs ER. Now, Dobbs ER is the organization that reviews information for release. Doesn't mean public release all the time. They do what's called a restricted release. I'll explain that in the presentation. But they are the ones responsible for reviewing and then potentially releasing the information or releasing it with restrictions. That's key, and that's coming up. These emails really gave an inside look into Mr. Elizondo's efforts on getting these declassified. And contrary to the public story, these emails really displayed nothing connected to UFOs or UAPs. Does that mean that they're not connected, meaning the videos? Well, I'm not sure. I'll let you decide. But it's really interesting to see the inside, behind-the-scenes look. And even though I will deal with this in the presentation, I will say this quickly, because those who may be listening may instantly think, well, Mr. Elizondo was hiding classified information from Dobbs ER, so he just had to call them drones, balloons, UAVs, or UASs, UAVs and UASs being fancy acronyms for drones. That really is the basis of any argument on what Mr. Elizondo was doing, because again, he did not say UFOs or UAPs. These videos, according to him, were drones and balloons. Now that argument, well, it's classified that they're UFOs, so he held that from them. Here is the spoiler alert, and then I will have you listen to the whole presentation. Dobbs ER is cleared to the highest levels of classification, which is top secret. So whatever classification these UFO videos were, which strangely, according to Mr. Elizondo in these emails, were unclassified, meaning they weren't classified. They were sensitive because they held maybe geographic coordinates where the aircraft were operating. All of that is obviously very sensitive. Okay, and so we'll get into all that. But according to him, they were not classified videos. They were considered unclassified. So even though they're unclassified, that does not mean that he can go out and release them, which is why he requested the review process. These emails, which I was aiming to dissect just the emails, it turned into a much bigger presentation because I realized there were so many misconceptions about the videos. And now with this controversy about the emails, I thought, okay, let's just not dissect the emails. Let me give everyone everything that we know up until this point. And so it turned into a much larger presentation. It's lengthy, I admit, but it is as informative as I can make it for you at this point. There may be more information and evidence coming out, and I look forward to that. As you know, I will report it to you. I will offer, obviously, opinions along the way where it's warranted, because sometimes it's not warranted, and I just throw the information out there. Other times, I think it's okay to try and dissect and make sense of all of this. But no matter what, I always give you 100% of the evidence. I don't expect you guys to believe everything that I say. I invite you to challenge everything, but it is as real and as accurate as I can make it, and I appreciate you tuning in. So stay tuned, because this is that full presentation. If you can't watch on YouTube, enjoy the audio version. It's coming up. All right. I know I am late. Do not get mad at me. I apologize. Of course, there was a update that I had to do as I was starting the software, and you never like live, so I apologize for that. So I appreciate all of you coming in and taking the opportunity to watch this. It started to be, and let me know in the chat room just to make sure that the audio is okay and give me a check. But really quick, this started off as just kind of an expose on these newly released documents regarding Luis Elizondo and his efforts to get the 3 AATIP or UFO or UAP, whatever you want to call them, related videos. And I decided to kind of take the opportunity to, in essence, make a presentation to really take the opportunity to go through the entire lineage, to talk about a lot of misconceptions out there, and to talk a little bit about some documents that may help decipher these that really ultimately no one is talking about. So it seems like all the audio is good. So I'm just going to jump right into it. I've got quite a few slides to go to. Yes, this is a full presentation. Yes, this will take you from the beginning and the inception of how this all started. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on all of that kind of stuff, but I feel that it is going to give fairly good background to these videos, what we've been told, what we are being told, and what it all means. Now, one of my primary objectives for this is ultimately to fact check those that are telling you what they want you to believe. But on top of that, fact checking myself. It's not popular to go against the grain, I think is how somebody put it on Twitter recently. And I get that. And so what my objective here is to give you that expose and overview and so on, but also source everything. Show you guys some documents, not just the Luis Elizondo emails, but show you guys some documents that really help make this a little bit more clear. And I think that that's what we're missing in a lot of these blogs and articles and online chats and communications and comments and so on, some of which get fairly heated. But I want to get beyond that. One of the other objectives, obviously, is I think a lot of those misconceptions are very genuine. Sadly, as you will see towards the end of this, the mainstream media, or at least those that are deciding to cover this, really aren't doing a great job. And they're omitting a lot. And I think that the genuine misconception is people are trusting sources like that. They think they're being told the truth, yet a lot of it is very easily disproven. I'm not out to get anybody. I'm not out to make anybody look bad, Mr. Luis Elizondo included. Rather, I just want the truth. For those of you who know me know that that has been always my drive now for more than 23 years. And the reason why, again, this presentation kind of came together here in just the last couple of days is I wanted to finally just take an opportunity near 2 years after the first of the videos appeared to just take that opportunity to get to the bottom of it and try and figure it out. And those emails that were released may help do that. So let's go ahead and start. For those who have been living under a rock lately, for those who are unsure what in the world I am even talking about, very briefly, in December of 2017, 2 videos were published by the New York Times. Now, I will go through all 3 videos. First and foremost, the gimbal was one of them that was published. It also includes the FLIR 1. This is the one that's most commonly referred to and talked about simply because we have the most context. This is also known as the Tic Tac incident, but that FLIR 1 dropped as well. Later, and I'll get into this, the Go Fast was the third video that has surfaced. These are rumored to all be UFO related, or UAP. We're starting to reinvent the phenomena into a new acronym, or at least the last couple of years anyway. There's an effort for that, which I think is fairly silly. But those 3 videos have been widely reported on throughout the last near 2 years. Now, this is thanks to the Stars Academy of Arts and Science. Now, we know that they are the primary ones responsible for bringing these out to light. I have always praised that. I have always complimented that effort simply because this obviously was something that we just did not know about. And Mr. Elizondo appeared in October of 2017. Now, let me get my laser pointer. Actually, I can do a laser pointer here. That is Mr. Luis Elizondo. Now, this is Tom DeLong. He is the interim, now labeled as the interim CEO of To the Stars Academy. You'll also hear me refer to them as TTSA. That just makes it a little bit less of a mouthful. But he would be your CEO, or as of now, interim CEO. This here is Christopher Mellon. You'll know him from, if you're into politics, you'll recognize him from that. And obviously the Unidentified television series. This man right here is the most interesting to me, even to this day. But I was sitting here in my computer chair as you watch me, and I watched this stream live, and I was fairly fascinated. I was not skeptical. I was skeptical, but I really had no reason to doubt their story. And Mr. Luis Elizondo came forward with a story about heading a UFO program. And it just kind of snowballed from there. Steve Justice, Dr. Hal Puthoff, and Jim Semivan here at the end. So those are the guys that really are credited for bringing this story to light. And mainly, I personally credit this man, Tom DeLong, and this man, Luis Elizondo, for doing that. I thank them both. I've always been, again, very thankful for that because it's a fascinating story as this unfolds. What it's going to unfold to, well, the jury's still out on that, to be blatantly honest with you. But that being said, that is kind of where we put our credit. Now that was October of 2017. December 2017, the 16th to be exact, the New York Times and Politico dropped simultaneous articles on the same day detailing this top secret UFO program, the secretive UFO study known as AATIP. In October, we didn't know the name yet. In December, we finally put a name to it. This also started the controversy on whatever that name really was. New York Times said Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. Politico said Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program. It's weird how I pointed that out and I get the most heat from the skeptics, yet Brian Bender, who starred in the show, was the one that ultimately started that by reporting, what seems to be the wrong name. Be that as it may, I'll take the heat for you there, Brian. But regardless, we got these 2 stories. And the New York Times is the one that published these 2 videos, the gimbal and the Tic Tac. And those are the ones that really made headlines. I'm telling you, this went viral. This was around the world within days. It made, and rightfully so, made headlines. It was a very, very cool story. Now, ironically and weirdly, oddly, strangely, whatever you want to say, there's been interviews. I don't have exact quotes. I tried to find a couple of exact quotes, but it's pretty well known that the New York Times has stated that there was no coordination with TTSA about that story, meaning that they were not working hand in hand. They were doing their own independent study, if you will, of this AATIP program and ultimately had published the article. However, the To the Stars Academy YouTube page uploaded it the exact same day. So that must just be a simple coincidence because theirs were nicely edited with a logo and, of course, links to invest in their company. But nothing to see there. On the website for To the Stars Academy, they started speaking my language a little bit. Through December, January, on their website, you were able to read, at least to this today anyway, if you go on, this footage and all official United States government footage you will see on To the Stars Academy's Community of Interest, or COI is what they call it, comes with essential chain of custody documentation, validating that it is received in its original and unaltered form and is authentic. Now, here's the problem. This thus began the red flags for me. I've been around the block long enough, and anybody who uses FOIA and researches things, when you get videos out, because at this point it wasn't 100% proof positive on how it came out, and we'll get to that, but these videos came out, there's no such thing as a chain of custody document. Let me show you what a real chain of custody document looks like to the Department of Defense. This is what's called DD Form 1907. This actually is a chain of custody document. You'll notice on here that there are absolutely things that you would see like very much a law enforcement investigation or police or so on and so forth, that you have what you're shipping, all of the information that pertains to the evidence, signatures of passing of that evidence from one person to another, even the time of day, the date, so on and so forth. That is an official DoD form, Department of Defense. So likely if they had anything related to the Department of Defense, which if we assume now that these are Navy videos, well, they would use this form. Now, to be fair, I dug a little bit more. Now, the Navy itself has their own chain of custody document. This is called OpNav 5527/22. That's what you see on your screen here. This also is a chain of custody document, very much with the same types of details. Signatures, what are you shipping, what are you handing off, who's getting it, so on and so forth. So I see absolutely no way that these forms can apply. So the red flag started for me right away because it sounds cool, right? It sounds great that TTSA says, hey, we're not going to show you guys, but we have proof positive that these are real and unaltered, and we have the chain of custody document to prove it. Yet here are the real forms, and that would not pertain to the videos. Now, do they have declassification notices? Do they have something else other than the documents we're about to talk about? I'm not sure. I'm open to it, but they haven't shown it yet. Now, in February of 2018, so just a couple months after the New York Times published those videos, Wired Magazine started to have the red flags also. A great journalist by the name of Sarah Scholes published an article, What is up with those Pentagon UFO videos? Now, she contacted the Pentagon, and ultimately a very interesting picture started to emerge. The Pentagon was saying, pretty much not saying that those videos were fake, but rather she was saying the major in the Pentagon by the name of Audricia Harris, she's a lieutenant colonel now, she was denying that the DoD ever released the videos. Now, that started a snowball effect that would last months that yours truly got very much entrenched into. But it actually just took a couple of months for the Pentagon to not deny the videos were real, but rather that they should not have been out in the open. Now, fast forward, I was able to also get those very statements that the major from the Pentagon had told me directly the DoD did not release those videos. Now, we'll get into that a lot. But again, I'm going a little bit chronologically for you guys so you can see exactly what we are dealing with and what really what the controversy is. And so again, this is a little bit of a chronological breakdown as we go forward. Now, that Wired Magazine article was published in February of 18. Now, fast forward a couple weeks to the Stars Academy drops the third video. Now, that's the third video that I keep referencing. That's known as the Go Fast. That was uploaded to their channel on March 9th. Didn't make quite the headlines that FLIR and the others did. However, it did make its rounds, and it did make some headlines, and obviously people started scratching their heads and wondering what the heck was going on. Was this disclosure? Was the government coming clean? What is this? And that obviously progressed the story a little bit. On the website for TTSA, they started also speaking my language again. This is something that I'm very intrigued by because when they did the breakdown of the Go Fast footage, which they said was shot in 2015, they said it should be available to any member of the press or public via the Freedom of Information Act. Well, bingo. That that really kind of that speaks my language, is the way to put it. And so, of course, I was already going after the videos, but obviously filed some more. Now, I'm going to back up. This is the only time I back up chronologically because, it works better on the storytelling. But I'm going to back you up a couple weeks to February 25th of 2018. Now, my friend, who I still consider a friend, although I don't think he's a fan of mine right now, Mr. George Knapp, who co-hosts Coast to Coast AM on Sunday evenings. That is the George Norrie show for those who are not familiar. George had Luis Elizondo on that program. It's a 4-hour program, hours 1 and 2 were Mr. Luis Elizondo. How's this for synergy and a coincidence? Hours 3 and 4 were yours truly. It was not planned. It just happened that way, and I appeared after Mr. Luis Elizondo. That was pretty much the closest I had ever come to him, though we did not talk. Strange coincidence, synergy, whatever you want to call it. So in this program, this was a very interesting rundown by Mr. Elizondo. Reason is because we were hearing all of these, we were seeing all of these headlines that were going around, but no context or very little context. The context that we were getting, there were quite a few questions that were coming along. One of the questions that people like me had was, how did the videos come out? How did Mr. Elizondo orchestrate this? He was the one that was credited, and this is going to be important in a couple minutes. He was the one credited for spearheading this movement to get the videos out in the open. So obviously, if anybody knew, it was him. In this program, he broke it down. He talked about what's called the Defense Office of Pre-Publication and Security Review. This is better known as Dobbs ER. This is the only time I'm going to read something I think. I don't know. I hate reading, but I'm going to go ahead and read this because I think it's important. This is from the website for Dobbs ER. The Defense Office of Pre-Publication and Security Review, or Dobbs ER, is responsible for managing the Department of Defense Security Review Program, reviewing written materials both for public and controlled release. This includes official government and defense industry work products, as well as materials submitted by cleared or formally cleared individuals pursuant to their voluntary non-disclosure agreement obligations. Dobbs ER also coordinates official work products with defense enterprise stakeholders to ensure that information being released is both accurate and represents the department's official position. Now, again, I promise you that's going to be one of the only actual things that I read to you, but I felt it was important because this is going to play a role in a few parts of this presentation. Dobbs ER is the one that manages and is responsible for the declassification of material within the Department of Defense. Okay, I'm stressing that. They are the ones to go to for managing those security reviews and the security review program as a whole. Now, for those that are taking notes out there, they are mandated by 2 different DoD instructions. I'm not going to read those to you, and you're welcome in advance. But if you're curious, DoD instruction 5230.09 and 5230.29 are the ones that give way more detail than you would ever want about the Dobbs ER process. However, one thing to point out about Dobbs ER is the fact that they are cleared to the highest levels of secrecy. There is no doubt about it. You can see this as well on their website, that they have communication methods for unclassified, secret, and top secret information, all of which utilizes different servers, which I'll get into in a few minutes, but different encryption methods, obviously, and different security precautions and so on. My point here is that they are absolutely cleared to see anything and everything, all the way up to the highest levels of classification. Now, if you're a member of the DoD, you have to submit this. This is a blank DD Form 1910. Yes, there's lots of forms and lots of paperwork with the U.S. government and the U.S. military, but be that as it may, this is what you have to fill out as that DoD officer, personnel, whomever that's requesting a review of something. Now, fast forward to April of this year. Okay, so that's the rundown of the Dobbs ER process that Mr. Luis Elizondo gave to George Knapp on Coast to Coast in February of 18. Now, in April of 2019, George Knapp actually gets a copy of the DD Form 1910. And so he publishes it on his website. This is the screenshot. He did a news piece on KLAS, which is a Las Vegas CBS affiliate. And so he did this breakdown and released the actual DD Form 1910. Pretty interesting to see that this is how Mr. Elizondo did it. But what's strange are two things. Number one, the form isn't signed. Now, don't worry, I'll deal with that, because that was my first red flag on, hey, what's going on here? This is the official, the authorization that before DOPSR sees it. That's key. There's a huge misconception about this. Block number 7 has to be filled out by the supervisor of the requester. However, the requester can actually authorize this in their own request. I know that sounds silly, but they request something and then they authorize their own request. In Mr. Elizondo's case, that's probably what happened, and there was a little bit of laziness, to be blunt, and they just didn't fill it out. This was the key section, however. The name, the person that was requesting it, was redacted. Now, we got the full rundown more than a year prior from Mr. Elizondo, giving precise details on how this was done. Now, the assumption was he did it. He was credited for it. TTSA was taking a lot of credit. They still are for things. So what's going on here? The name was blacked out. The title was blacked out. The name obviously down here, telephone numbers, and so on. These are not official redactions. Okay, these were probably done either by George Knapp or KLAS legal team or whomever mysterious person leaked it to George Knapp. Now, I think we can kind of figure out where he got it, but where I can't answer something for you guys, I'm honest, there is no way to know except if George Knapp tells you where he got this document. So it always confused me. In the story that he ran, Mr. Knapp ran, after the I-team obtained the paperwork, Elizondo was asked if he filed the form with the Pentagon. He said he's not authorized to comment. That's up to the DOD. I have no idea why the secrecy surrounded the fact that his name was on it. In fact, I dug up well over 30 DD Form 1910s, all of which had the names unredacted. The requesters were not secretive. It was not redacted, contrary to what usually happens under FOIA when you get a document with a name on it and it's exempted. On the contrary, the DD Form 1910s were primarily open. There was one exception that I found out of, I think, 30, I forget how many, 35, I think. But don't quote me. You can see it all. And by the way, that link in the description, I'll go ahead and fix that after. I have no idea how that got broken. I did put it in the chat for those of you who are watching live. So I downloaded all of these DD Form 1910s, found them through documents that I had already had in my archive, dug up some more. And again, that secrecy behind it is absolutely a mystery. And as we go through the presentation, that mystery will only deepen on why they were trying to cover up Mr. Elizondo's name, whomever covered it up. There, again, that was not an official release that was reported by George Knapp. That was a leak. Now, the key here was cleared for open publication. Now, that means that the form was stamped and approved on August 24th, 2017. Now, I'm going to go back and show you guys what's really important here, which is Section 3. Now, Section 3, when, again, we eventually will find out who this is, but when the requester submitted it, in Section 3, they asked for the presentation of the publication data. What that means is the information that you're requesting, which in this case was an MPEG file times 3, so 3 videos, which ironically had the same exact name that TTSA had, put out. So apparently they didn't change anything, or they had them named that internally, which actually is kind of bizarre, not unheard of, but a little bit weird. The subject was the key for me, UAV, which is unmanned aerial vehicle. Now, that's not disputed. That's documented within DoD files. UAV is another way to say drones. Don't listen to people when they say unidentified alien vehicle, unidentified aerospace vehicle. Don't listen to any of that. They're not redefining acronyms here. Balloons was also a descriptor, and UASs. Now, what's UAS? That's unmanned aerial system. That's another one, UAS. Don't listen to the spin on this. These are just AKA drones and balloons. So in addition to that Section 7 that was blank, why were these 3 videos being labeled as this? We don't know. In Section 3, again, to go back to that, When it talks about how the person is going to use these 3 videos, it says not applicable, not for publication, research and analysis only, and info sharing with other United States government and industry partners for the purposes of developing a database to help identify, analyze, and ultimately defeat UAS threats or drones. Now, that, again, was all a very weird... That was just very weird. Like, why would you, we've been bred for months and months and months and months now, well over a year, that these were UFO related videos. Now documentation leaks out and it says that they're drones and balloons. Now, let me remind you guys, DOPSR is in charge of the security review program. They manage everything. You can't lie to them. They are cleared to see it, know it, understand it, and deny it. So why that was not correct is beyond me. So I questioned it. I went to the Pentagon and I showed them the DD Form 1910, asked them to authenticate it. This is what they said. I can confirm that the Form DD 1910 you asked about is a valid DD 1910. The standard procedure is for blocks 1 through 7 on the form to be filled out by the submitter before sending to DOPSR. However, occasional exceptions have occurred. Now, the reason why I kept pointing out that blank section 7, that was a big red flag for me. But you have to research things to find out that even though that was not protocol, things sometimes happen. And the Pentagon was openly admitting that. They said exceptions have occurred. So we'll put that section 7 discrepancy to bed. The submitter, the Pentagon goes on to state, the submitter is responsible for any disclaimers on the form as approved, and also abiding by any amendments that may be included in additional communications from DOPSR to the submitter as part of the approval process. That means that they have to follow Section 3, because the Pentagon goes on to state, per Block 3 of this Form DD 1910, the submitter requested release of the video solely for research and analysis purposes by U.S. government agencies and industry partners, and not for general public release. So here we go. In this year, after the DD Form 1910 leaked, and it was spun in that KLAS article that the government released the videos, the government had no problem admitting that was a real document, but also had no problem stating, sorry guys, this does not prove what you are trying to claim. What I was also really kind of surprised at, not to take away from George Knapp's reporting, because what he has contributed here has been very important. I don't always agree with the method that he comes out with the information and how he displays it to the public, but it's the heart of it, the core, the information, the forms, the documents themselves, which is the most valuable. But I'm really surprised that Mr. Knapp did not go to the Pentagon. At least it's not evident by that article. Why not? Because it doesn't matter if a journalist agrees or not with the Pentagon. You can go ahead and dispute it. That's okay. But to have the quote and to show that both sides part of journalism, that whole unbiased part, is key, and that wasn't done. So when I did it and the Pentagon responded, it really deepened the mystery, because then all of a sudden we were reinforcing what we had already heard a year prior from Major Audricia Harris. The Pentagon was doubling down. In this particular statement, because I kept going back and forth with them, I was looking for different angles and so on. Another Pentagon statement to me directly, and anyone can verify this, they said the New York Times and To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences would not have been considered an industry partner to the United States government for the research effort identified in Block 3 of the DD Form 1910. In other words, there is no spin. Why they submitted that? Well, because I was pushing, because those that are supporting this effort, what I call the TTSA superfans, were spinning that To the Stars Academy was a partner. The New York Times was a partner somehow, and yet that was absolutely not true. Here's a screenshot of the FOIA that I had requested in March of 2018. This was shortly after Luis Elizondo's interview. And so now that we've kind of given you the rundown of the DOPSR process, my request, as you see screenshotted here, is that effort to get the information, not only the DD Form 1910, but all communications and everything about this that has been archived by the U.S. government, namely emails. Now, I filed this. They received it on March 12th, 2018. For those FOIA people taking notes out there, 18F0644 is the case number. Now, here is the official release letter, which was sent to me on the 16th of this month, just days ago. Friday to be exact, of last week, as this episode's being recorded. I'm not going to read you the whole thing, but this is the release letter. This is what accompanies every Freedom of Information Act release. It goes through what you're receiving. Usually this paragraph here is the most important because it tells you what, if anything, is denied. In this case, they located 16 pages, which you can see here, and they determined that all 16 could be released. However, they were making redactions pursuant to what's called Exemption B6. B6 is something I mentioned earlier. That is if there's a name, an address, something with personally identifying information, that's Exemption B6 and it's redacted. So not necessarily classified, but rather exempt. Attached to that letter were about 16 different pages of emails breaking down the communications between Mr. Luis Elizondo and Dobbs ER, the agency that, again, looked over those 3 videos. What I'm going to go ahead and do is go through these. These are the newly released documents, okay? I didn't want to spend a half hour going through background stuff before we got to the meat, but I felt it was necessary for those because not everybody who watches the Black Vault knows entirely what's going on the ins and outs of the UFO field. And so I felt that background was necessary because now through the rest of the presentation, you'll realize why some of those background tidbits are incredibly important. Now, I'm going to go through these emails one by one. I'm going to start chronologically in reverse order. That's important because you'll see later how this is being spun and literally rewritten to fit someone else's narrative and tell you a story that is false. So I'm going to get into all that. So for now, I want to give you guys the groundwork of what the documents say. Now, the string of records starts on July 24th, 2017. Now, we can assume from this that this is someone that either worked under, for, or knew Mr. Elizondo, and Mr. Elizondo asked for Dobbs ER's email address. This was pretty unexciting. There's nothing here other than Dobbs ER's publicly available email address, which kind of makes me scratch my head again a little bit because Dobbs ER's email address is listed on their website. So I'm not sure why Mr. Elizondo had to delegate that out, but he did. So on July 24th, he received the email address for Dobbs ER. So obviously this is connected somehow to the release of those videos. So on July 24th at least, Mr. Elizondo wanted to pursue getting those videos declassified. What followed are 3 different emails sending the 3 different videos. He didn't do it, however, until August 9th of 2017. You can deduce from this that he had a problem sending all 3 videos at once, so he broke it into 3 different emails. The timestamps are a little strange. The explanation for that is probably just, again, they're big files, so maybe they just went out of order, no big deal. But again, in the interest of accuracy, that is why you're seeing these, what seemingly are out of order. But on August 9th, 2017, the earliest of the emails was sent at 1:45. Let me turn my laser pointer back on here. You'll see that the first email, Dobbs ER received the FLIR video. That's what you see here. Second email was at 7:31. Oh, excuse me, I'm going the wrong way. Sorry, I pressed the wrong button. Apologies. The second email was 4:21, a couple hours later. This was the go fast email, so he submitted. I'll get back to the context of this, but I want to show you the 3 emails. The third was just minutes later, and this was the gimbal video. Also attached to this, you'll see from the attachment list here, Elizondo Dobbs ER Request 2017-8-9. So he filled that out on August 9th, and that was attached. This also reveals a couple of different things from the previous leaked version, and we'll go into the specifics, but obviously Mr. Elizondo was the requester. We already knew that. Why it was redacted, you tell me. As we go on, I think there may be reasoning for it. But why he was withheld from that leaked document, I have no idea. The email that I'm going back to was the one that had the meat. This was the one that Mr. Elizondo had essentially explained why he was doing what he was doing. In addition to filing the DD Form 1910, he was explaining to Dobbs the context. I'll break it all down for you. These are Luis Elizondo's words. Per your guidance, please find the attached 3 MPEG files for your review. Please note, although the files are unclassified, they are being sent via SIPR or SIPR in the spirit of extra precaution. No locational data is provided in any of the files, and therefore there should be no classification issues. For you computer geeks out there like myself, you may have noticed something. Gimbal was in WMV format. GoFast, WMV format. FLIR1, MPEG-4 format. Mr. Elizondo's email, they're all MPEGs. What's wrong with that? This footage and all official U.S. government footage you will see on TTS Academy's Community of Interest comes with essential chain of custody documentation, validating that it is received in its original and unaltered form and is authentic. This proves that they were edited. Plain and simple. The narrative that we are being told that sounds really cool, in the beginning, you can shoot down the chain of custody documentation because it makes absolutely no sense. Here, the second part is disproven by Mr. Elizondo himself. Obviously, these either started in MPEGs or he made this horrible mistake. Regardless, they were edited to strip out the locational data, which I agree with. There's nothing wrong with that, right? There's no sleight of hand there. That made them unclassified according to Mr. Elizondo. But don't do that. Don't tell the public something that isn't true. And yet, To the Stars Academy, yet again, starts to put their foot in their mouth, stating things that in time are proven true by their own board members. Now, some people wonder why I have red flags. It's for reasons like that. They obviously are not telling you the truth. Now, one other line, this is some fun information if you're not aware. You heard me say SIPR or SIPR. The way that Dobbs works, and actually this is true throughout the Department of Defense, Department of State, a couple other places as well, they use 3 different computer networks to transfer classified information. Now, you can't always just, Gmail a classified document. There was a politician that got in trouble for that recently, but anyway, that's a whole different story. But this is the explanation on why. Things like Gmail or just standard email servers do not give the proper security for classified information. So there are 3 different ways that they communicate. Remember in the beginning of this presentation, I showed you 3 different emails for Dobbs. This is why. They will receive information in an unclassified format. That's called NIPRNet. Now, for those of you who understand cloud computing, imagine that the internet is some gigantic cloud. Well, NIPRNet appears in that cloud. So in essence, yes, it's unclassified, and yes, it's secure to a point. Not anybody can access it, but you can if you try hard enough. That's where the hacks come in, and you hear about that kind of stuff. But regardless, that's why they keep unclassified information there. It's a little bit easier for them to transfer. Obviously, technologically, it's a lot easier to maintain. Even though they keep it on secure networks, you're still within, again, that cloud of the internet. SIPRNet is something a little bit different. This is clearance up to secret. Now, this is not, as you can see in the cloud, this is an official government breakdown here. This is not my graphic. This is something that they use in training material for the Department of Defense. And so this I felt gave a good graphical representation of it. So SIPRNet appears outside of that cloud, so to speak, and is clearance up to secret. JWICS is the third. That stands for Joint Worldwide Intelligence Communication System. JWICS is the top. This is the most secure network. This is cleared all the way to top secret that you can transfer all of that information from computer to person. Again, that Dobbs homepage shows you the 3 different email systems, email addresses that then route you to the proper system. A lot of them are closed. Like I said, you can see it, it's outside of the cloud. So if you went on there and you tried to send an email, my guess is you're going to get an error on the way back. It's not going to get there. So just a little bit of background on how the DoD actually works and communicates. And obviously these emails reveal that this was all being transferred on the SIPR server, according to Mr. Elizondo, just in the spirit of what he said, spirit of extra precaution. Dissecting a little bit more of Mr. Elizondo's email to Dobbs ER, and I'm breaking down word for word here. Strategic issue, unmanned aerial vehicles. Remember UAVs? Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. In parentheses, balloons, commercial UAVs, private drones such as quadcopters, etc., continue to pose a potential threat to DoD facilities, equipment, and location. Army, Navy, and Air Force have all acknowledged the potential threat by UASs to DoD equities, but no single unclassified repository exists to share this information across all stakeholders. Mr. Elizondo has an excellent program here and an excellent point. There's nothing UFO related in this, though UFOs may ultimately become an aspect of it. However, he does absolutely have the right drive for this effort. And again, I want to state that because if the DoD really does not have that type of a database, or at least they didn't in 2017, in this day and age, they really should. They really should. And so I think that look, I'm going to give Mr. Elizondo credit. This was a good effort. But what's being revealed here is an absolutely 100% different narrative on what these videos are. They're unclassified videos, number one. And number two, Dobbs ER is being told that they are drones and balloons. And to make matters worse, in Mr. Elizondo's own words, he's breaking it down in the email, stating unmanned aerial vehicles, balloons, commercial drones, private drones, quadcopters, etc., etc. That's problematic. Now, there's documentation to support everything Mr. Elizondo said. I received this before I ever knew the name Luis Elizondo. These were NCIS. You know the TV show. You know that that's the first thing that you thought of. But NCIS stands for Naval Criminal Investigative Service. Years ago, I filed a FOIA to them looking for UFO information. And what I got back was a few UFO-related documents. That's a different presentation in itself. But also drone encounters, unidentified drones that had encroached on military bases, and the investigations that ensued thereafter. What type of a threat could they have been? Were they a threat? Who was responsible? What type of repercussions happened? So on and so forth. So again, Mr. Elizondo had a very excellent drive with this. There's nothing wrong with what he was doing as written away from the UFO thing. And documentation absolutely backs that up. So you can find these documents, there's quite a few of them from NCIS on, again, UFO related, though most of them were drones, but he has an excellent point. Going again back to that email with Mr. Elizondo, the purpose of those 3 videos. Our collective purpose is to eventually establish an unclassified database or community of interest of related signature data to be accessible by stakeholders such as DIA, the Navy, defense industry partners, and perhaps even state, local, and tribal authorities to catalog and identify specific UAS threats to national security and or DoD equities. By creating a virtual library to catalog and analyze each event, our hope will be to better understand the capabilities and ultimately vulnerabilities of these systems. No disagreement from me, yet nothing on UAPs or unidentified flying objects the way that we know them and the way that the Nimitz and the gimbal and the GoFast video, or the FLIR one, I should say, the gimbal and GoFast were described. So that was his justification in that email. But we also see the emergence of someone being CC'd who is not being revealed. Now, again, this is not uncommon. I was actually surprised that the names that you could see, other than Mr. Elizondo, were visible. Now, Russo, who is the Dobbs ER contact, that's the one you're going to see the most. He's the one that spearheaded, again, from the Dobbs ER side, getting these videos reviewed. Yet CC'd was this mystery person. Now, this was August 9th, 2017, that email that I just broke down for you in depth. That was 4/21. 30 minutes exactly go by. And what I would assume is that same CC'd person up here sends an email 30 minutes later. Now we see the emergence of a classification. The other ones were not classified. Michael, who's Michael Russo, that's the Dobbs ER guy. I am checking with NavAir to ensure these files are unclassified and will relay the response. That's obviously the Navy. Thank you for your time and assistance. 622, that same person emails again. Michael, just to be clear, we should consider these files to be secret/no foreign. Now, if you don't know what no foreign means, that means no foreign nationals. So no foreign nationals can see this material. You have to be cleared up to secret. We should consider these files to be secret/no foreign until I'm able to establish that they are to be considered U/FOUO. That means for official use only. What this is stating is this mystery person did not believe Mr. Luis Elizondo. That's standard, I'm sure. I'm not saying that there is any reason to doubt Mr. Elizondo in this email, but this will be an important point come when I deal with Mr. Elizondo's statement on who these people are. So it should be well known now that even though Mr. Elizondo said, yeah, these are unclassified, whomever this mystery person is says, nope, we're going to consider them secret until I can determine that. Okay? And here's a spoiler alert. That means this guy is not with AATIP. Okay? The rumor is these guys are like involved in AATIP. That's not true. At this point, according to Mr. Elizondo, he headed the program. This person does not doubt his director and what he claims if he's part of AATIP. I just don't see it. So that's why I'm pointing that out, because this is a very important email when it comes to the claims of Mr. Elizondo, which are coming up. This is a full screenshot of the documents that I just showed you close-ups of. This is very interesting when within SIPRNet or so on, when they send emails back and forth, each email, if you see where the laser pointer is, says classification secret/no foreign. Every email, and I didn't put a screenshot on, but I have thousands of examples, and I apologize. I ran out of time. That's why I was a couple minutes late. But anybody who uses FOIA, my FOIA people out there that are kind of taking notes on all this, if you communicate with the FOIA office, not all the time, but sometimes they'll put classification unclassified at the top. Even if you're not part of the military, even if you're a civilian and not part of the DOD, they do this. It's a fairly standard thing. So this came in when this mystery person started communicating. All right, that's going to be a key on the fact that no other emails, if you go through every single page, has a classification. Down here, this is the biggest misconception about these emails that I am seeing, and it drives me nuts. And I'll be honest with you, I had to look up a lot of this also. It's not like I just know, what the breakdown is, but so many people are guessing. It's this section down here that has 3 lines: classified by NIAX, derived from, and declassify on. Let me break that down real quick because I think it's really important. You see this a lot on government documents. First, this NIAX. I have seen everything from that's the new program name to AATIP. That is a secret, program involving UFOs. That is some, I'm not even going to go through them all. Point is, people are starting to guess on what this means. This is fairly common to see in classified documents that have been declassified. There are rules and procedures and so on and so forth that break down how these types of lines are written. This is from an official DOD presentation that details, and this is a training presentation, I should say. It's an unclassified presentation given to those that become responsible for classifying information or putting the classification classify bylines on. What I highlighted here, the classified byline must include the name and position or personal identifier of the derivative classifier. What does that mean? Personal identifier. It's a code. And so here's another training material, this one by the National Archives. And this down here, what is a personal identifier? Some agencies will assign an identification number to each employee that can be used in place of a name and position. This is going to be key with the next line. But in other words, that's just a person. Try not to have people tell you that that is some secret code word or some kind of big reveal that it's a UFO program. It's not. The next line is what makes this really interesting. Derived from, might be hard to read, ODNI, it's the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, HUMINT or Human Intelligence, HUMINT SCG, that stands for Security Classification Guide, dated 2012-7-3. That's July 3rd, 2012. Now, what in the heck does that mean? Well, what happens is that when you have the person, whether it be by code name or name, classify a document, you have to explain why. And you will see different things here. It's not always ODNI, Human SCG. It's a lot of different things. Sometimes it's an executive order. Sometimes it's a internal publication. You know, the derived from line can be quite a few different things. In this particular case, it's this manual. So I dug it up. This is the declassified manual that is referenced on explaining why that document is classified. Now, I find this kind of stuff fascinating. It might be dry for some, but this actually possibly explains why that is classified. That human security classification guide is entitled Office of the Director of National Intelligence Classification Guide, ODNI-CG. This is, which is really weird. The person, by the way, is using an outdated version. So, go figure. But anyway, the newest version that I am aware of is the September 30, 2014 version. This is the version that this mystery person was citing. So I looked at this after I kind of dug this out and thought, well, why would this manual be on that email? And the reason is potentially that third line that said 50x1/hum or human. 50x1-hum information, which would clearly and demonstrably be expected to reveal the identity of a confidential human source or human intelligence source. Note, I'm skipping. Classifier shall use 50x1-hum if the confidential human source is clearly revealed. Contact CIO-IMD for additional guidance. This started to get interesting because I don't think it has anything to do. This is a guess, by the way. No one can really answer this. I'm sure Mr. Elizondo can, but I think that this is a fairly good educated guess because I don't think it's the content within that message. I think it's the person who wrote the message. This is another page from that same manual that justifies the classification. Again, that 50x1-hum or hum, however you want to say it. It's human, for human intelligence. Information identifying current or former ODNI, that's Office of the Director of National Intelligence /CIA officers as being, and then it's classified. Classify secret/NF, that's short for no foreign or no foreign nationals. We know that if and then it's classified. Why is this important? Because I bet you that guy who's responsible with a high security clearance to review information like AATIP, related material, UFO videos, top secret drones, bombings of Kyrgyzstan. I mean, you name it. I bet you that guy was former ODNI or CIA. And I bet you his identity is what's classified. Now, he's probably been in the field for a long time. He probably came back, got the position he's at, and he's somehow connected to document reviews in whatever agency he might be in. He doesn't have to be OSD. He could just have some kind of release authority over that information. So this is actually really fascinating to me because, again, it's just an educated guess. But, again, it matches up exactly to our mystery person here. And only on the emails that mystery person wrote and were involved in had that classification. So, if that's what it is, very, very cool, but it is not an AATIP member, okay? And even though I'm again, giving an educated guess on the identity of why those emails are, just those 3 emails or that one page that I showed you is classified. Everything else is unclassified. I think that it's that identity. That's really what I think it is. Because if you fast forward to August 17th, right? These are going through the emails chronologically. Okay, we just went through all of the submissions on August 9th. Something happened, meaning, I don't know, Mr. Elizondo had to resend everything. So our mystery person who was CC'd in the August 9th gets forwarded again. However, he's absent here and no classification marking. That's why I think that it's that person that creates the classification marking when they're involved in the conversation. So again, very cool little tidbit. Again, not really relevant per se, but again, it's being spun to be something that it's not. And the likelihood of him being a AATIP member is nil. I really just don't see that happening. So he resends, Mr. Elizondo resends, 9:43 a.m. on August 17th. Those two emails go in. And 1 minute later, the third email. So he resends everything again, resubmits it all. Why? I have no idea. There's no context. It's just all resubmitted. August 23rd, Michael Russo, who we know as the Dobbs ER guy, tells Lou, hey, I'm still working on it. He says, so-and-so has been in contact and I've explained the situation to him, but wanted to ensure you knew I was still working the request. So in other words, it was still being processed. Next up, that same day, 8 minutes later, 8 minutes, Luis Elizondo responds, thank you sincerely, my friend. If it is easier for you or more streamlined, then please consider our request for unrestricted release. However, my intent is to maintain positive control, but I know it's a bit unique of a situation, so whichever is easier for you and quicker. If at all possible, I would like to have authority to move it down to unclass or unclassified by tomorrow. Again, sorry for the inconvenience. I owe you a coffee and a donut. Thanks again. I very much would like a coffee and a donut, Mr. Elizondo, especially right now. Be that as it may, this was sent to Mr. Russo. This is very important on many, many levels. Why? Because this proves right here that that's Section 3, remember going back when I dissected the DD Form 1910, actually means something. When he says not applicable to presentation or publication, that it was for United States government use only. This proves beyond any shadow of a doubt he knew that he was locked into that. So those that attacked me and attacked the Pentagon for it, by Mr. Elizondo's own writing, are proven wrong. He knew that by his DD Form 1910, he was not able to do anything more than what he asked for. So in this, which is unorthodox, from what I can tell, not that I do Dobbs ER reviews every day, but unorthodox to submit a DD Form 1910 and then do additional requests on top of it via an email. Now, the Pentagon statement to me referenced amendments. Well, if this is an amendment, let's operate off of that assumption for a minute. Let's just pretend this is an amendment. The last email in the chain was sent the next day by Mr. Russo. This is the Dobbs ER guy. August 24th, 2017, 3:20 p.m. Lou, if the service level OCA verifies to me, simple one-sentence email is fine, that removing the metadata from the videos makes them unclassified, please feel free to move forward with the release. This was in response to Mr. Elizondo saying, hey, if it's easier, let's do unrestricted. The way I read this is, hey, look, the way that it is written, and here's why, the way that it's written, here's your release, cleared for open publication. This was the attachment to this email. This will become very, very important when you see some of the spin articles that have appeared. So Dobbs ER had given the approval based on the wording of Section 3. We know that because of this line right here. This was attached to this. So the approval was already given. However, what I feel is probably unorthodox was Mr. Russo, and I tried to get you an official response on this by this video. Sadly, I could not, but I'm going to continue to work on it. But from how I read this, and I will allow you to do the same, how I read this is, and here's the attachment, again, it was already cleared based on this. The OCA, now what's the OCA? It's the Original Classifying Authority. There's a couple different variations of that, but essentially whomever's responsible for classifying the video in the first place, the Original Classifying Authority, is the one that has to write Dobbs ER and say, look, we're responsible for that XYZ classification. As long as the metadata is coming out, then yes, it's unclassified. In my opinion, what would happen next These emails would be attached to the DD Form 1910 if that assumption is true, and these are considered amendments, and that would then therefore allow Mr. Elizondo to put them to the public. Here's the problem. Today is August 21st, 2019. August 24th, 2017. Nearly 2 years have gone by. There is not an email from that service level OCA, at least not in this FOIA release. I showed you that FOIA release letter to show that nothing was withheld. What I'm trying to get an answer to is whether or not the Navy, because we know that by the form itself, the Navy is here it is down here, if you can see it. OCA is Navy POC, or point of contact. So we know that the Navy is the official, the original classifying authority. There's no communication from the Navy here. There's nothing. So the only way that this could be, again, for unrestricted release, was that DOPSR said, okay, fine, we'll sign off on it, but the Navy has to tell us it's okay. And there was not a single communication from the Navy. Now, does that mean it doesn't exist? Of course not. I'm willing to accept that, but I have to point it out because no one is talking about that. No one is realizing that the approval was already given when this email was written. It's probably a little unorthodox, but DOPSR realized that if it was an unclassified video, if Mr. Elizondo really did submit an unclassified video, then they probably didn't really care about redoing all of the paperwork, and probably said, yeah, man, if you're going to, release these drone videos, go ahead, as long as the Navy signs off on it. But there is no Navy sign off. Now, again, I'll repeat it 1,000 times. I am open to the Navy coming in and telling me, yes, we responded, or so on and so forth. And by the way, so you all are listening, I do have messages into the Navy, and yes, they are working on that to try and get an answer for me. I spoke with them yesterday. We'll see how it comes out. And if they give it to me, I will absolutely release it, and I will amend what I'm saying. But you'll see up here that when Russo gave the approval of this DOPSR form, whether you have to abide by Section 3, he CC'd the Navy also. He let them know, hey, if you guys want to give me a one-sentence email, I'll go ahead and allow Mr. Elizondo to do it open, unrestricted release, which is what Mr. Elizondo asked for. And yet that is not there. So I'm looking forward to seeing it. But until then, don't listen to the spin, because that is not real. It's just not right. One of the other things that's really interesting about this DD Form 1910, something that is very rarely talked about, is the title of Mr. Luis Elizondo, the Director of National Programs Special Management Staff within OUSDI. We hear OUSDI a lot for those who actually do details on Mr. Elizondo. The NPSMS, or the National Programs Special Management Staff, of which he was the director for, of which is not in dispute that I know of, this is the first official document that actually places him as the director of the NPSMS. The only other reference that we have to it on a document is his leaked resignation letter. Now, I have no idea if that resignation letter is real or not. I did a FOIA request. It came up with no records. There is a potential legal reason why, so I've never put a lot of stock into that on whether or not that resignation letter is real or not. But then Mr. Elizondo actually talked about it in one of his lectures and referenced it like it was real, so I kind of assume it is. And then, of course, the History Channel put it on their website as well. But this is the first time in an official release that it places Mr. Elizondo as the director of the National Program Special Management Staff within OUSDI. Let me tell you something. If I was able to take Mr. Elizondo out for a beer or coffee, I could probably talk to that guy for hours, because I started researching exactly what that office was. And let me be the first to tell you, there is like nothing available on what that office was. It may also, however, play a role in this 2009 letter by Harry Reid. This was the one, if I'm not going to read it to you, but this was the one that requested special access program status for the AATIP program. A little unorthodox for a United States Senator to get involved like that, but in 2009 he felt the need. Whether or not he believed in this or what, he put his weight behind trying to get special access program status for the program, which would have benefited the government contractor at the time. Yes, Bigelow Aerospace. The whole sweetheart deal thing is something that is not put to bed, and that is a different presentation in itself. And yes, I do feel that there is a lot of evidence to support that this is a whole sweetheart deal. But what's really interesting about this letter was the very last page that was the breakdown of who Harry Reid wanted as having access to this program known as AATIP. So in attachment 1 of his letter, and I'll go back to Mr. Elizondo's title in a second, but I wanted to give this groundwork. It gives kind of a breakdown of what Senator Reid was proposing. He wrote it to the Deputy Secretary of Defense, saying, this is this is who I want to have access to this program. He explained in his letter here, and here why it was important. And you had the Deputy Secretary of Defense, of course, Senator Reid himself, Senator Daniel Inouye, who was the one who also kind of co-sponsored the AATIP program, then a bunch of redacted lines. This side surfaced as a leak from none other than George Knapp. Where he got it from is a mystery. It is authentic, however, which I had later verified with the Pentagon, but I didn't until George Knapp released a second version quite a bit later. This actually appeared after the Pentagon finally issued a statement about Mr. Elizondo himself. They stated that Mr. Elizondo did not have any responsibilities on the AATIP program. Essentially, all of his claims were fairly bunk. That's me paraphrasing, by the way. But their exact wording was he had no responsibilities on the AATIP program. So when George Knapp then re-released this, Mr. Elizondo was listed as number 10. Now, to Mr. Elizondo's biggest fans out there, this was it. This was proof positive. People like me who wound up in the article that broke the news about Mr. Elizondo and the Pentagon statement that he didn't work on the program, well, they were elated. They said that we were all wrong and that the Pentagon lies. They didn't lie about, UFOs when they comment on it, of course, but when they comment bad about Mr. Elizondo, well, they're just all lying and it's a big, campaign against his character, assassination campaign against his character, and so on. I bring this up because I think that once you go back to his title, which again was the director of the National Program Special Management Staff, I think we could put up a solid reason on why he was here. And we might even put up a solid reason why they didn't want his name out in the first place. If he was head of the program, we don't know who these people are, but my guess is, and I do believe that this is in order of essentially rank and importance, you have to understand what this title is. And as I said before, there is no mention of this title at all. It seems really secretive. And when I said I'd wanted to throw back a beer with Mr. Elizondo and talk about all things non-UFO, I really mean that. Because one of the only official documents that I was ever able to dig up is actually deep within a transcript that had to do with this evil guy, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, or KSM as he's often referred to. And deep within this transcript is a fascinating story, which I will not go into now because it's irrelevant to this conversation. But it talked about the National Program Special Management Staff, where Mr. Elizondo worked. They're labeled in this official military commission transcript as the SAP access people. Now, the reason why it came up was that an interpreter that was involved in the trial for KSM lost his SAP access for reasons that were never explained to the legal team. Now, again, this goes into much, much detail, which I won't get into because it's irrelevant. But what this does is actually give a official record deep within a military commission transcript dealing with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed on what the NPSMS actually was. And they were involved in SAP access. That they were the ones that were involved with giving the access to people that would essentially deserve it or were cleared to work on that specific SAP. Now, my friend, colleague, and previous guest on this program, Lieutenant Tim McMillan, who's a lot smarter on SAPs than me, maybe we should bring him back on and have him talk about this because, again, he's much more educated than I am. But I think this here is black and white, that this is and I'm sorry, I'm hearing my door behind me. And I am home alone. I'm not trying to be paranoid. I think my wife might be walking in. But the SAP Access people were the NPSMS. And so it makes now perfect sense on why he would be involved in this letter. It would make perfect sense on why Harry Reid would have to put in the person from OUSDI or USDI, which is on this, why he would be on there. And so it's not because these are the AATIP people. It's not because these are the current members or the ones accessing the AATIP program. It's because if it got SAP access, he would absolutely be on the list. He would have to be, being the director of the National Program Special Management Staff. So that, I think, is a plausible explanation of why he's here, and absolutely does not place him as ahead of anything. Now, to support all of that, because we have to deal with the time frame this was written, 2009, there's a WikiLeaks site called IC Watch, and it deals with a lot of different government personnel and so on and so forth. And in it is the resume of William Schultz. It actually lists Mr. Luis Elizondo within OUSDI as a supervisor when this man was within that agency back in 2008. Even though this isn't definitive proof, this does place Mr. Elizondo within that very office within the approximate time frame that Harry Reid wrote that letter. What that means is that further solidifies that if anybody were to be on that list from OUSDI, it would be the person that would be responsible for SAP access, and that would be Mr. Luis Elizondo. Now, if you don't trust WikiLeaks, like me, I don't either, I verified the guy's resume on Indeed. For those taking notes, here's the URL below. It is publicly accessible. You can go ahead and type in that really long number if you'd like, but it breaks down Mr. Luis Elizondo and another supervisor, Miss Heidi Smith, when he was working with OUSDI. So that is proof positive that he was probably within that office, and it makes sense that he was on that 2009 Harry Reid letter. So that does not prove anything. And by the way, there were subsequent Pentagon statements about that, and they confirmed he definitely, the letter was definitely real, and it definitely didn't change their stance. They stand by that he was not involved in that program. Now, that's some cool background about that office. Now, here is his official statement. His official statement it came this weekend, Sunday. So just let me pull up a calendar real quick, just to timestamp it for you. This was released on Coast to Coast AM. This was Sunday the 18th. And essentially, this was Mr. Elizondo's response to the release of those documents. Now, I as well had reached out to Mr. Elizondo through the weekend. I tried, and TTSA. I tried to get statements based on 5 different questions that I submitted to them that I felt were important. And I received a response from TTSA, but not Mr. Elizondo. TTSA said they were going to forward it on. However, they didn't respond after that. And then after that, it was just radio silent until now. So if I do get a response, I will absolutely post that. Sadly, I did not for this video, but he did send this through George Knapp and Coast to Coast AM. What's very odd about it is the fact that it was on Coast to Coast AM through George Knapp, not a PR rep, not any official channel to talk for TTSA. That's what's strange. And Coast to Coast AM, not KLAS, not the CBS affiliate, but rather a nighttime, mostly paranormal related talk show. Very popular, but it just didn't seem right. I'm going to read through his statement first, and then I am going to break it down for you. Here is what Mr. Elizondo said. Once again, this is yet another attempt by a few antagonists to bend facts around their false narrative. What the emails actually prove is as follows. Number 1, I did indeed work in AATIP. Number 2, I was in a senior position. Number 3, the videos were coordinated for release the proper way, and the decision was a group decision. Number 4, the Pentagon and not Luis Elizondo approved the release. Glad we went into third person here. As for the notion by the conspiracy theorist, I don't know who that is. By the way, I was silent by the time that he submitted this, so apparently there's another conspiracy theorist out there. As for the notion by the conspiracy theorist that somehow I released the videos under false pretenses is further negated by the following. A. At the time of the request, AATIP was still a small and sensitive program that I was not at liberty to discuss among a broader audience. As such, I used the term UAS as a general phrase that people could understand without specifically highlighting UAPs. B. That individuals who were also part of the AATIP and UAP effort and who ultimately authorized the release were CC'd on all the emails, so those who needed to know absolutely knew. This is the OCA, or better known as the Original Classification Authority. This is evident by the fact that the Pentagon chose to redact their names, namely because they are still part of the effort and work at the Pentagon. Now remember why I pointed out that one particular mystery person? The one who doubted Mr. Elizondo? Why would he doubt him if he worked for him? That doesn't make any sense. You don't tell your director in a program like that he's wrong about security classification. And yet we're supposed to believe that that's who that was. Now, again, I think that there's a pretty strong reason on who that potentially was and where he worked and why it was classified. But redacting their names is not unheard of, even if they're not some cool secret former CIA operative or something like that. Mr. Elizondo goes on to say, C. It was the Pentagon and not me who believed releasing the videos to a broader audience would be easier. One can read my emails to see I wanted to keep the videos protected, but they felt releasing them at the unrestricted level would be easier and more efficient. D. The reason why it reads not applicable under the section publication is because last I checked, you can't publish a video. You release a video. As such, I do not want to confuse Dobbs ER by indicating I wanted to publish the videos. We wanted to release them instead. Proper English grammar. Signed, Luis Elizondo. Let's break it down. I did indeed work in AATIP. Where in all of those emails did I point out to you that AATIP was even mentioned, that UFOs were even mentioned, that UAPs were mentioned, that anything unidentified was mentioned? Nowhere. The fact that you lead off with this is proof positive that I worked within a program that's not mentioned, not even described, not even referred to, not even alluded to, that's not going to jive. I was in a senior position. That's accurate. Director of that office. Yeah, absolutely. He didn't say AATIP, so I'm going to assume he meant the directorship. The videos were coordinated for release the proper way. Absolutely. That's standard. There's nothing wrong with that. The Pentagon and not Luis Elizondo approved the release. Well, it depends on what release you're referring to. That's half right. It's definitely not a public release, at least not officially anyway. At the time of the request, AATIP was still a small incentive program that I was not at liberty to discuss among a broader audience. As such, I used the term UAS as a general phrase that people could understand without specifically highlighting UAPs. Do you remember that rundown I gave you of Dobbs ER and the 3 different communication methods? They are cleared up to the highest levels of classification. For him to feel the need that he needed to keep information from them in order to, what? Get these videos out? That he was withholding classified information, that doesn't jive. That doesn't jive on many levels. I'd love to be a fly on the wall when Dobbs ER learns that he felt that he should keep information from them on an unclassified video. That entire statement is laughable. Mr. Elizondo stated, this is evident by the fact that the Pentagon chose to redact their names, namely because they are still part of the effort and work at the Pentagon. I think we've already put that one to bed. He also said, but they felt releasing them at the unrestricted level would be easier and more efficient. I'm sorry, do you remember those emails? Who wrote that? He did, not the Pentagon. How he can try and pass off that it was them that actually said it and not him, I have no idea. You can look at the emails yourself and actually see that he was the one that wrote it. It was from him. He also says the reason why it reads not applicable under the section publication is because last I checked, you can't publish a video. You release a video. This is my favorite part. Simply because now he's just saying, well, everything I put there is just because you can't publish a video. He didn't talk about the USG reference or the United States government only use. He didn't talk about any of that. He just focuses in on that. However, he leaves out a very important part. that section is not called publication. It also is presentation. Now, all of that is then negated because he leaves out conveniently the information that you all can verify for yourself. Now, that's not playing semantics. That is switching the narrative to make a point, holding facts from you while making a statement, even though you can fact check it yourself. Did he not think people would do that? Remember those DD Form 1910s I dug up? Here's one of them. Here's proof that Section 3 can absolutely have information like a website. This is a verified DD Form 1910. This is authentic. It was cleared for open publication and was submitted to have the information published to a website. Here's another one, published to a website, cleared. Here's a proper one when you're asking for a public release with no limit on distribution. What do you put in Section 3? Available for public release. All proof that Section 3 mattered. And in his statement, he tried to make it seem like something it was not. And yet official documents absolutely disprove what his claim is trying to be. I loved we don't publish a video, we present them. On United States government servers alone, if you search for published a video, meaning government documents from the federal level to the state level, anything on government web servers, more than 27,000 times they talk about past tense published a video, past tense. Another 13,600 talk about publish a video in present tense. Now, what does that mean? The United States government on that many from the top down is not using proper English grammar? Come on. This is proof positive. Mil domains or military domains also have quite a few examples. So that's ridiculous. The whole argument is bunk. I think those emails prove an awful lot, but I think that we also have a lot of unanswered questions. There's one thing that I want to talk a little bit about beyond the investigation, and that is, what are you guys being told? Now, I tried very hard in the last, I can't believe it's been an hour and 20, so I'm sorry that it's come up this long. But in the last hour and 20, I tried to source everything that you heard. I tried to give you the documents, show you stuff you've probably never seen before, all trying to make this make sense. I welcome you to challenge that. I welcome you to question it. I welcome you to verify it, fact check, do whatever you need to do. But I want to take a couple minutes because some of you have asked quite a few different questions on why I'm so hard on those that are reporting on this topic, that they are doing a good job and that they are trying to give you the facts. Sadly, I don't think that that is true, especially after this. And I think that there is a effort to spin, and I'm not entirely sure what the root of it is. I really don't. Now, some of you may not like this section. I'm not trying to pick on anybody in particular, but I think it is important at this point, because I've alluded to it an awful lot, to point out the inconsistencies now that you guys are well versed on the facts and what's going on, but the inconsistencies on those that are writing about the topic and what they're actually doing with it. Now, we know that Mr. George Knapp, who, again, I have nothing against, he's a real journalist. I don't use quotes when I describe George Knapp. He works for a CBS affiliate. I don't always agree with that presentation. Like I said, I wish he would do other things. But look, I would say that about anybody. He's a real journalist. I don't have anything against him. But what's really interesting in the last couple of weeks is I'm seeing he's giving a pedestal to those bloggers that I often reference that are giving away the erroneous facts, changing the narrative to fit an agenda. I even jokingly, and then now I'm starting to think that some of this is part of some kind of marketing effort. The spin, which you're about to see, is literal fabrication. The two people that George Knapp is giving a pedestal to, and here are posts by George: Alejandro Rojas, Danny Silva. Alejandro's been around for a long time. You've heard me talk about him. Yes, there is, there's we're not friends anymore. And that's evident by things that he has said and I have said, and that's fine. But he has this pedestal now on the national mainstream from George Knapp. Here's one of his articles on this very topic that was put out by George Knapp. Danny Silva, relatively new, obviously has a lot of respect for George. He calls him his hero in one of his articles, but he's been writing a lot. George, forwarding out those. KLAS is not doing, as of the recording of this, stories on this anymore. That's why Coast to Coast AM did Luis Elizondo's statement, which is still confusing. So the reason why I think that this is important to address is the fact that mainstream media is giving this a pedestal. So I decided, okay, look, let me put my money where my mouth is and look into what is the story that is being given out. And I'll start with Elizondo. This appeared on the 18th, very, very quickly after the documents surfaced from Roger Glazel last Friday. Roger is a Swedish blogger who I have respect for, is chasing the evidence, got these documents, posted them online in some internet forums. Elizondo was quick to jump on it and start, writing his articles. Again, I'm not trying to pick, but I think that this is incredibly important to point out a few things from this article, mainly because I found myself all over it. By name, I was never contacted once, and the story within it is factually incorrect. Some of it is accurate, but factually incorrect, not because of a difference of opinion, but rather because he's changing the facts. Let me prove it. Elizondo had written, this was not the first time OSD Public Affairs got it wrong, meaning about the DD Form 1910. He was going into extensive detail about the videos released and so on and so forth. This was not the first time OSD Public Affairs got it wrong. They had claimed AATIP had nothing to do with UFOs. Later, they recanted that claim, telling the New York Post that AATIP did pursue research and investigation into unidentified aerial phenomena. You know what's funny about this? He doesn't source this at all. You know why? Because he can't. There is no OSD Public Affairs statement saying that it was not a UFO program. That allegation came from people like me who started doubting that it was a UFO program, and I still do. There's a lot of reasons for it, but they never gave that official denial. It was just kind of implied, or so some of us thought. I have no problems admitting that I had my reservations, thinking that UFOs had anything to do with this program. Obviously, as he put here, the New York Post got a comment that UFOs ultimately, or unidentified aerial phenomena, did have an aspect into this program, but he doesn't source this. And there's a reason for this coming up in his article on why he's starting to set up that the government is just a big, bad, lying machine. Now, to back up what I'm saying, it only took till about February of 2018 for the Pentagon to put in writing that the AATIP studied aerodynamic vehicles engaged in extreme maneuvers with unique phenomenology. This is going back to a journalist who I respect a lot, Sarah Scoles, in Wired magazine. They were talking about these types of vehicles that had these extreme maneuvers, unique phenomenology. You want to call them UAPs? That sounds like it. However, there were a lot of doubts on whether or not UAPs or UFOs ultimately were involved, but the Pentagon never denied it. So people are starting to create aspects to the story that aren't true. Now, some of you may wonder, well, they said UAPs. Why don't you just believe it? Well, I'll give you a quick reason why. Elements of a program do not define the program. This is the X-37B. There's not a whole lot of knowledge that we have on it. We don't know a whole lot about it. It's highly classified. The mission is highly classified. But you see these things down here, the tires? When you fly something like this and bring it back, you need to research what these tires are going to be. The size, the pressure, the material, how it's made up, the placement. Would you consider the X-37B a tire program? Of course not. These are aspects to a bigger program. Was AATIP a UFO program? Quite possibly, but we can't say it yet. Sorry, we just can't. Even though they said UAPs were an aspect of it, they said that it did involve, we don't know what percentage. That may sound like being a skeptic, but it's all about what you can prove, not what you want. And that's why I bring this kind of silly point up that aspects to a program do not define the program. He went on to start referencing a previous article from quite a few months ago, one that I had a problem with because he completely omitted a Pentagon statement to fit a narrative. He said the request said the videos would be released for research and analysis only and info sharing with other USG or United States government industry partners. We know the quote. This is what Elizondo said. There is nothing that prohibits these databases from being publicly available. Further, Again, this DD 1910 is a form to approve information for public release. This is wrong, as we know. We've proven it. The database is being publicly available. I had a Pentagon statement that I know he got because he responded to it on Twitter. He knew that this existed. He withheld it from his readers. He only used the other one that helped him make that claim. However, he completely held that from his readers. The videos were never officially released to the general public by DoD and should still be withheld. He was trying to play this narrative, which we can prove false on many levels, but he started withholding information. That's how I knew that there was a problem here. He said, I suggested that the idea that the videos were not released for public consumption is not clear. There is a large stamp on the form that says cleared for open publication. The instructions for submitting Dobbs ER requests state that the status of cleared means, quote, the information may be released without restriction by the originating DoD component or its authorized official. If the information is not for public release, it is stamped not cleared for public release. And he cites this. See this blue link here? He links over to 5230.29, which I have already gone over. Here's what's funny. It's not funny, but it has to be pointed out. All of this is made up. If you pull up this, go to his quote. It does not say cleared for open publication, like the DD Form 1910. It says cleared for public release, an entirely different stamp. See what he did? He changed the narrative to try and make a point, hoping that you would never fact check. The information may be released without restriction by the originating DoD component or its authorized official. That's the quote. He took it right from there and made it all up. It gets even better. Going back to Dobbs ER's homepage, do you remember when I read this to you? I won't read it again, but the highlighted part, and controlled release? You don't need to take my word for it. What is a controlled release in addition to public? That's that section 3 that means something. You can disprove it with Mr. Elizondo's own words and Dobbs ER's website, putting to bed that Dobbs ER is not all or none, classified or unclassified release to the public. Controlled release is they'll authorize it, but under controlled circumstances, meaning United States government only. So all of this is easily disproving the articles that are given that pedestal. This email, again, as a reminder, this is what he said. And again, to clarify that, this is what he said about changing it to unrestricted release, and we don't have a message from the Navy authorizing that. But obviously, Mr. Elizondo's own words prove Section 3 mattered. Here's my absolute favorite of everything, and it's sad. This, let me read it to you. Russo did not appear to be concerned about any restrictions. Russo, again, was the Dobbs ER guy. If the service level OCA verifies to me, simple one-sentence email is fine, that removing the metadata from the videos makes them unclassified, writes Russo. Please feel free to move forward with the release. Alejandro goes on to state, Lou apparently took that to mean Russo wanted to release the videos, unrestricted, and responded. If it is easier for you or more streamlined, then please consider our request for unrestricted release. However, my intent is to maintain positive control, but I know it's a bit of a unique situation, so whatever is easier for you and quicker. Ultimately, the DD 1910 was stamped cleared for open publication. Given this conversation, it would appear there was not an issue with an open release of the videos on the DoD side of the exchange. Boy, that sure sounds good, doesn't it? For fiction. And the reason I say that is Lou did not respond at all to that. This was the email written on August 24th at 3:20 p.m. that Alejandro just told you. Lou saw that, responded, and everything was kosher. That response was a day earlier, a time-traveling response. Mr. Elizondo responded more than a day prior to Mr. Russo writing that email. That's changing a narrative in hopes that you guys just don't notice, that you will not fact-check what he is telling you. He spun an entire narrative about changing this email and this date, this email and that date to fit an agenda. That's what's given the national stage. Ultimately, the DD 1910 was stamped cleared for open publication. Given this conversation, it would appear that there is not an issue. It's completely fabricated. There's no way around it. You spin a narrative around falsehoods. Elizondo ended with some snarkiness. And this goes back to why I pointed out in the beginning of his article what he was setting up. He says, so Elizondo was not part of AATIP, just like the DOD never released those videos. Sarcasm. Why do you feel the need to do this? Why would George give this a national stage? George has a big following. This is the trusted source that we keep hearing about. Ironically, Mr. Elizondo pulled Alejandro's name out of the crowd. He was sitting in the front row talking about how great of a journalist he was. Do you see the connection? That these are the names that are all connected, telling you what to believe. Not facts, spinning narratives, changing dates, and telling you things that are not true. It just doesn't make sense. One of the other things he says, a document created by AATIP sponsor Harry Reid lists Elizondo as a member of AATIP. This DD 1910 email string further acknowledged Elizondo's involvement in AATIP. Really think about that for a moment. We've already dealt with the whole AATIP thing not being mentioned once. And now he's telling you, well, Harry Reid wrote something that says he's a member of AATIP. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. He ends, in their defense, Reid told the New York Times the program was secretive and its creators did not want its existence known. It's tough to find details about AATIP by design. Spinning that narrative that AATIP is this ultimately top secret, highly classified, Elizondo's next door cubby person doesn't even know what he's doing. And yet Harry Reid, in his own words to the New York Magazine, said about AATIP, most all of it, 80% at least, is public. 80%. Now, I'm sorry, wait. Harry Reid just said it was this highly secretive program, was secretive. 80% unclassified. Leave out what does not prove what you want people to think. Try to ignore it so they don't fact check. I love the fact that all of a sudden politicians speak gospel when they talk about UFOs, like they don't flip-flop, lie, or conjure up stories. So maybe Reid really did say that this was some kind of highly secretive program. But somewhere else he says that it's 80% public. So are we supposed to put any weight into what he said whatsoever? Sadly, the other one that George Knapp is giving a pedestal to is the newcomer, Danny Silva. His article is kind of no different. These emails shed light on Elizondo's role in AATIP. Now, where does that even come from? Elizondo said it. Alejandro said it. Danny is saying it. And it just doesn't make sense, except when you want to spin a narrative that isn't true. He also says in his article, sources have told silvarecord.com various unspecified names that were redacted in this document worked for Mr. Elizondo at the time. Of course, we don't know who those sources are, and of course, we don't want to deal with the facts, but these are the claims that are given the national stage now by George Knapp. These are the ones that are carrying the voice, changing that narrative. These are not opinion differences, by the way. These are literal changes of dates, the chronological order of emails, facts, you name it. Here's another doozy. In the emails themselves, even the official use only and secret/no foreign classifications were scratched out. This was not done by Elizondo. They were scratched out by the people sending the emails, all of which is made up and a lie. Through the Freedom of Information Act office, you have a completely different process for releasing information. That's how these documents came out. They have document reviewers, and they have the ultimate say on what comes out. The person that wrote the email, they don't scratch out anything. This, again, is just making it up as you go. Here's another one. Even though Elizondo requested the videos to be released with a not-for-publication status, the DoD seemed to disregard this and gave the videos the okay to be released in a larger sense when they stayed in the document cleared for open publication. That's just, again, is fabrication. We've already dealt with all the facts. I won't go through it. But this is what's given the national stage. All of the Pentagon statements that officially acknowledge the DD Form 1910, but say that it does not prove a public release, are ignored in these articles. And when they are dealt with, they're just, they're all lying to you. And yet when the Pentagon does state something about UFOs or UAPs, it's absolutely gospel. It is a selective belief system that has worked its way into the bloggers, which, is kind of irrelevant, except when they're given a national stage by a real journalist with a big following. And that's problematic. Here's another one. The videos were classified as secret at one point. By definition, that makes them part of a classified program. UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena, and even AATIP were not named here because portions of the AATIP program were very classified. I don't know what very classified even means, while other portions were not, but remained unacknowledged. None of that makes sense at all. Again, making it up as you go. Harry Reid, 80% public, but all of a sudden now we have a secret access program. By the way, secret access program doesn't exist. It's special access program. So the guy who writes this to try and spin a narrative doesn't even know what SAP means. Now, acronyms, semantics, you're going to say I'm picking on them. You might be right. But this is the problem that we have. And this is what I gripe about. And now it's being given a national stage. That's problematic. That is spin. Now, I really appreciate you guys going through that. I wanted to do the spin section simply because it needs to be done. We need to look at who is saying what, who has the stage, and a lot of those misconceptions, like I talked about, on social media, I think are very honest because they go to blogs that are given that pedestal by George Knapp, thinking that they are seeing researched material. And yet they are literally structuring a narrative around falsehoods, changing dates, changing emails, changing whatever. It's just not accurate. And so that's why I wanted to at least go through that with you guys and see what you thought. Now, I am fine with some questions for a couple minutes. So let me know if anything in the chat room. I have not been able to look at it at all throughout that. But hopefully, like I said, you did kind of learn a few things and hopefully it made sense. And you also see that not everything you read is true. I know that is kind of a given. Let me see. I know that there's a big delay in the chat room. So if you guys want to post some questions, I am fine with it. If not, I will just go ahead and end it. Just go ahead and put questions in all capitals if you could. That would be fantastic. If you guys want to, let me know if you want me to put this whole PowerPoint presentation so you can download it. That's fine. I'm fine with it. So they lied to get the film release. Who cares? Well, it goes to credibility. And I'm glad you brought it up. Who says they lied? Meaning, if Mr. Elizondo wasn't lying to Dobbs ER, that they really are balloons, drones, unmanned aerial vehicles, unmanned aerial systems, what if that isn't the lie? What if the lie is after he retired and came out and spun this different narrative? So you can look at it two ways. He lied to Dobbs ER. That is problematic in itself because it goes to honesty, it goes to credibility, it goes to the fact that you're willing to not tell the truth. However, if he didn't lie to Dobbs ER and he's lying to the general public, don't you want to know that one? That's what I want to know. Some people have often said, well, he hasn't been prosecuted yet, so it's probably not that big of a deal. Well, that might be the reason why. His First Amendment right probably protects him from spinning whatever narrative he wants, as long as he does not act like a spokesperson for the DOD. Probably why he often says, I can't speak for the DOD. There is a legal reason why. And this is easily verifiable. I don't have slides for that, simply because I didn't know I'd go into it. But you can easily verify that you can say what you want as long as you do not encroach on your NDA or act as an official spokesperson to the DOD. So his First Amendment right would absolutely protect him coming out and lying to you and I. So it's quite possible that he didn't lie when he got the videos out. That's my bigger point that I think people miss. I think maybe those questions or those answers on the DD Form 1910, they may be honest. That's what we have to absolutely consider. JetBoy33, so Elizondo never worked for AATIP at all. Well, JetBoy, it depends on who you want to listen to. The official word from the United States government through the Pentagon is no. When you look at the documentation and the fact that Mr. Elizondo is trying to say in his number one point in his statement that it proved he worked for AATIP, and we clearly see that it does not prove anything related to AATIP, that's problematic. I think that I hate to use the word desperation, but I think that now there's a need for him to kind of scramble a little bit. He was better served keeping quiet. For him to say these prove that I worked on AATIP and yet the documents don't even mention anything remotely close to what the program was, I think is problematic. So I'll let you decide on whether or not he did or not. I'm open to evidence of it. I reached out to him. I asked, I said, hey, if you've got anything, I'll be more than happy to publish it. Obviously, I am very hated in that circle, but my intention was, and whether or not, his following believes me or not, I wanted to help in the sense that I felt it was more damaging for the news to come out that he was not involved in the program, and that was all a spun lie. And I felt that that was more damaging than anything else that was out there. So I offered, hey, look, let me, whatever you have, document or a pay stub, whatever, let me try and disseminate it for you. But that was ignored, just like it was for today. And in fact, maybe I'll pull up, you know what? I don't want to screw this up. I was going to give you guys the 5 questions. I'll post them. I'll post you guys the 5 questions that I wrote to TTSA for comment from either TTSA or Elizondo or both. So I'll post those 5 questions. I have no problem doing that. They weren't anything personal. It goes into what I was talking about today. I felt like he has to address it, but we'll see. Let me see. Who has shunned you in UFO? Jesse. A lot of people, Jesse. Come on. It is true. I mean, I laugh about it, but it is true. And this is the sad part of it. I had pointed out Alejandro's article and just the blatant fabrication of and it's documented. It's not an opinion difference. It is, he's changing that narrative. I can tell you for an undeniable fact, he Alejandro went on his radio show and lied to the listeners about me reaching out to Elizondo. I did. I've explained the story a couple times, but the short of it is I tracked down Mr. Elizondo's personal email address. I wrote him so he knew that my reluctance to believe his story was not personal and not an attack on him personally. And we shared nice emails. He did not address anything. We went back and forth a few times, but he asked me to keep that conversation quiet, simply because he felt the people that followed him would think he sold out and was talking to the devil, meaning me. And I'm paraphrasing there. He didn't say devil, but it was that gist of it, and vice versa. Those who listen to me would think that I'm fraternizing with the enemy as well. I disagreed. I told him that. I said, but I would honor it, and I gave him my word. Alejandro went on his show, said he orchestrated me meeting him, took credit for that, said Elizondo wrote me a letter, and I ignored it. That was all a fabricated lie. And I've mentioned it a couple times. I'm saying it now a little bit more pointed, simply because when you look at his article, Alejandro's article, and his just blatant fabrication of trying to switch all of these facts for a narrative, I have no problem saying that's what he did with my conversations with Mr. Elizondo as well. And it's a shame. So Jesse, to go back to you. Yeah. I mean, there's other people that won't talk to me also. I've lost friends. Why is that? I have no idea. They're mad. Apparently they think that it was described by me once, and I got a lot of flack for it, but I'll say it again. It's not everybody, but it's a very cultish mentality that if you say something bad, you're evil and you have to, you have to be shunned. You have to be publicly ridiculed. And I'm telling you, there's been some nasty things that have been written and said about me. including the fabricated, lies and stories, but just nasty things. And, it's like, why can't you just have a conversation, or ask Mr. Elizondo? That's another thing about Alejandro's article. We all know that he has direct connections with Mr. Elizondo. He talks to him. He's on his radio show and this and that. However, he was not quoted at all. He never reached out. He wrote his article. He spun the narrative, but never once has any quote from Mr. Elizondo, which, is problematic in itself. All of this is for a reason of distraction. What are they taking our attention away from? Bob, that's an excellent question. I've heard that floated quite a few times, that there is another issue here, that, ATIP is a smokescreen for something else, whether it be UFO related or not. I have no idea, but I'm not sure. Excellent question. I wish I had a good answer for you. So it is important to call them out, Jesse. I absolutely agree. So I think that for now that we're approaching 2 hours, I think that that's a fairly good presentation. In closing, again, I was not trying to attack anybody, even though I know I will be attacked for doing so. But I think it's important for everybody to realize that that narrative from those who are writing about this and getting recognition on the national stage from people like George Knapp, who is a largely trusted person in media, is giving them that stage. I don't understand why he's doing that. And if that is what people are reading, this will fall apart. And the fact checking when other outlets, like whether it be Wired Magazine or Washington Post or whomever, start catching on that these stories are being spun and changed and facts are being, altered and provable. Again, these are not opinion differences. These are documented facts. I think that they're going to catch on, and they may ultimately start doing these hit pieces against the UFO field and the UFO community, which I don't want to see. IFL Science, which I talked about a couple weeks ago on this program, they absolutely did a pretty not a bad job. It was a good article, but it wasn't favorable to TTSA at all. And I think that that's what you're going to start to see. If these types of things come to light, if these types of things keep happening, you're going to see a shift. And I think you already are. One last thing that I forgot to bring up, it was a slide that I wanted to make, and I ran out of time. But this, I think, is incredibly important. When Luis Elizondo did his MUFON presentation, a audience member asked a question, and no, it was not me. I was not there. Audience member asked a question about who they should forward the Freedom of Information Act request to, that if somebody was seeking information on AATIP, who would they go to? Now, just a refresher, Mr. Elizondo headed, if you believe his story, he headed the AATIP program from 2009, according to the television show, or 2010, according to TTSA and Elizondo to me directly, and also Wired Magazine. So you don't need to take my word for it. They told Wired Magazine in February of 2018 that he led it in 2010. That was changed for the TV show to 2009. What's right, what's wrong, who knows? It's possible that they can't even keep their story straight anymore. But let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Mr. Elizondo led the AATIP program from 2010 to 2017 when he retired. That's 7 long years. I didn't go over it, but just a quick refresher. The OSAP program, which has loosely been connected to AATIP, rumored to be the same thing by Dr. Hal Puthoff. If you listen to Elizondo, they are 2 different programs. Why they contradict, who knows? It's another red flag and possible indication they can't keep the story straight. But regardless, 7 years of documentation can be found at OSD, if you listen to Mr. Elizondo. Only 2 to 3 years, depending upon the timeline, at the Defense Intelligence Agency. That was what handled OSAP for the first 2 years before it was transferred. To go back to that audience question, Mr. Elizondo's answer was go to DIA. Not both. Not OSD where he worked and had knowledge, but DIA. Now, why does that mean anything? Why is that important? And the reason why it is important is the fact that, well, let me put it this way. To a FOIA requester, the answer is always everywhere, right? You don't just focus on one agency. If in doubt, you go to all of them. Why this is incredibly important is that he is trying to get people away from the agency he worked. And that always rubbed me the wrong way. That always struck me wrong, because 7 years worth of documents under his tenure at OSD. Why would you not tell people to go after that? Instead, you tell people to go after DIA, where it was only 2 or 3 years, and you weren't involved. He may be privy to what's there, but regardless, he put people a different direction from common sense. It always sat wrong with me, and I think now it makes sense. These emails were released by OSD, that agency he didn't mention, but he worked for 7 years, heading this AATIP program, allegedly. What do they reveal? Well, they reveal some pretty bad stuff, including the fact that whole narrative UFO UAP thing is completely different on official documentation. My question is, did he know that? Did he know if people like me were to start to go asking questions and getting documents, eventually they would be released? And did he know that narrative that he has spun to the public or to Dobbs ER, pick whichever one, because both can't be true, did he know that would come out eventually, and that's why he was trying to mislead the public? I'll let you guys decide, but I think these emails are incredibly important because it reveals exactly why he probably answered that question the way he did. So, that said, thank you all. I know that's a pretty packed 2 hours, but hopefully that it was informative. I hope that gave you guys some leads to do your own research and figure things out. Don't take my word for it, please. As much as I chastise others, I ask you, challenge me the same way. Look up the documents that I posted, take whatever I said, challenge it, try and disprove it, and definitely have conversations with each other and with me. I'm totally open to that and look forward to it. So I do appreciate all of your time. Thank you very much for listening. This obviously will stay online, so if you're not listening live, I appreciate you listening to the recorded version. We'll see you next time.